All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. So in doing a little bit of a survey of the room, it sounds like a lot of you guys are in, I don't want to say a similar place because everyone's business is totally unique, but we've got a lot of early stage companies, some sub-revenue, but a lot of you, it sounds like, already have revenue in the door. You already have some sort of sales motion in place. So when I approached this today, when I started at Terminus, I was a 9th employee. We had maybe 4 or 5 low-paying customers. And so I tried to think back to, in our scaling from 0 to $1 million in 2015, what were the key things that we had to build and put in place to have the model that we could scale a sales org on top of. And so that's what I want to go through today. We've got a couple exercises that we'll do that I hope you guys will participate in. And depending on where the conversation takes us, if you guys want to go a different direction, we can switch it up a little bit. But I think this will be valuable given where this audience is at. So to get, let me put this in present mode. To get started, I just want to start with one quick concept or note before we really dive into the meat of this. This is a phrase, I don't know if all of you have heard this a million times, the rise of the buyer. But I think this is relevant as you think about how to build your sales model. Buyers are more educated than ever before, right? We have the internet. We have the ability to find out a lot of information on a company or a product before we ever engage in a sales conversation. So buyers have, in most cases, the power. In the old days, if you were a vacuum cleaner salesman and you went door to door, you had the power and all of the knowledge of what your product did to share with that person, and that person was dependent upon you to learn that. That is not the case anymore. So the role of sales is not to tell or show the buyer what a product or offering does. You can make a video one time that tells what your product does and put it on your website. So do not pay a salesperson to do that. Instead, the role of sales is to really help a buyer to understand how a product or offering can work in their environment to solve their needs and challenges, and how it can do this better than any other option in the market. The tricky thing today about competition is rarely it's just direct competition. So at my last company, a lot of you probably experienced this, we had maybe 2 direct competitors. But then there was a lot of other marketing technology a company could use that was competing for the same budget. So it was still competitive. And then there were tons of other initiatives in a business that could demand someone's budget. So competition, and there's also the competition of doing nothing. So competition becomes vast, and so your ability to explain to someone not only what you do, why it's valuable, but why it's their best option is really crucial. So you want to construct a sales model that allows for you to do that effectively. So really the 3 sales foundations that are important to have as you're scaling a team, and ideally you have at least the first 2 before you hire a sales team, is your value prop and your story defined. We'll talk more about each of these in depth, but that's really important. Your ideal customer profile, you shouldn't go out talking to people until you have a good idea of who you should be talking to. Now sometimes there's a bit of a cart before the horse challenge there. Sometimes you don't know exactly what that ICP should be until you have conversations, but you should at least make some assumptions to direct those conversations. And then you want to have a very basic sales process. And what I mean by sales process is nothing really formal, just a very basic structure by which you will go through to sell your product. It will evolve greatly over time, but if you just go into every conversation and run it differently, it's going to be very hard to keep up with what you shared and making sure you get all the proper things, which we'll talk more about, done that you need to do to make sure they're the right fit for you and you're the right fit for them. So having something consistent that you can go through will help you to maximize success and optimize. And so all these things will be really important, especially if you're a business that wants to take funding. Your investors will ask you how you're going to spend their money, and your ability to say, this is what we do, the problem that we solve, and the reason why we're valuable. Here's who we're going to sell to and the size of that market, and then here's the basic market. And then if that, once you have a sales process in place, you can iterate on it. Your ability to optimize and make things better depends on how structured that process is. So let's start with, well, let me take a step back. We'll start with the value prop and story. What is a value prop? It's pretty simple. A value prop refers to the value a company promises to deliver to customers should they choose to buy the product. So it's essentially a statement that a company uses to summarize why a consumer should buy a product or use a service. Pretty simple. What a value prop should include, and this is an art and a science, but there's really a big art component to this. And again, what the value prop you create on day one may adjust, so don't feel pressure that you have to pick the most perfect version. But you want to be thoughtful about it. Everybody in your company, even those not in sales, should know what your value prop is for your business. It should be that clear to everyone. So it should include what you do very simply without too many buzzwords. The more buzzwords you throw into it, the more people seem to be suspicious about whether you actually have a great product or not. So you want to very simply explain what you do. You may explain a little bit of how you do it, but a lot of that will be left for the deeper conversation. A value prop should be short. You really want to speak to the outcomes it drives. So back to the whole concept of being able to explain to a buyer why what you do can help them very specifically, you need to be able to speak to the business outcomes it can drive for them. Buyers do not connect the dots themselves. And then, not always, but sometimes in a value prop, you may want to include a little snippet about how it's different or unique compared to other options. Sometimes if you're doing something totally unique, it's very obvious that it's different. Other times, depending on what you say, it may put you in a certain bucket and you have to clarify that. So we're going to go through an exercise. We'll go through an example together. And the couple of you were in the session I did a couple weeks ago. This part will be recap for you. But we'll go much past that in the session today. We're going to start with a value mapping exercise. This exercise I've done with a lot of startups. I did at Terminus. Will help you to have all the pieces of data that you need to make a proper value prop. Sometimes I find in businesses that have been selling for a while, they mostly kind of know what their value prop is, but sometimes it helps to do this kind of elementary exercise to take a step back and really make sure they think through all the key components that make what they do so valuable. So we're going to do an exercise together. Can we have a volunteer, someone in the room who works at a company that we could talk through this about? All right. Come on up. Do you have a mic in the back? I should have asked for that before. What's your name?
My name is Gunnar.
Gunter. Okay. What company do you work at?
I work for Headway Platform.
Headway Platform? Mm-hmm. What do you guys do?
We do accounting.
Thank you.
Okay. Everyone hear me? Okay, yeah. So we help startups by taking care of accounting and recruiting, but we do it all at a flat fee.
Is this more of a service, or is there a product
Yes.
software?
This is a service.
A service. Okay. So in this exercise, and this is an example, it is way too small for you guys to see. Let me increase it a little bit. This is an example done by the company that I came from, Terminus, where I listed out, and this is an exercise we made all of our new hires do, features. So what does the product do? What are the benefits of those features or of those services that you provide? What are the outcomes that come back to the business because of those features and benefits? And then what are the challenges a person or business is facing that those benefits are beneficial? At the end of the day, you can spin your wheels going through this whole sales process with someone, but if they're not facing challenges that will give them enough pain to spend the money, you're not going to get the deal done. And I can tell you as a salesperson, I spent way too many hours doing just that, having 15 calls with someone who was never going to buy because there wasn't enough pain. So we're going to go through, I'll share this example with everybody after the session because I know you can't see it well here, so it can get your juices going about doing this exercise for your business. But we're going to go through your example live with the group. So let's start, we talked features, and so this is more of a service than a product, but totally fine, same thing. So what are the key elements of what you provide? Give us just a little bit more detail about the key things that you would do for a customer.
Well, with our flat fee model, what we do specifically is we allow the startup to save a lot more time so that way they can focus on the product and as well as sales, so that way they can grow and scale their company. And
you're talking benefits already, which is awesome. Let's take one step back, though. Just what you do for them. So you said you are taking over some of their accounting services in-house and doing it for them.
It's saving them a lot more time.
Yes, to save them time. Mm-hmm. What else? Is it just accounting? Did you say one other thing?
We do accounting and recruiting, so it's the back office.
And recruiting.
Yeah, so we do the back office altogether.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about benefits then. You already started going down that path. That's awesome. So you were helping them to?
Save time.
Yep.
so that way they can focus on their product and sales, and they can grow and scale their company.
What size businesses do you typically work with?
Typically, startups to small businesses.
Okay.
That's what we deal with.
Do you know about how much time you're saving for someone? Have you guys done any exercises to estimate that? It's okay if you haven't. No big deal.
We have not, but I know we save them a lot of time, and I mean a lot.
All right, so they save a lot of time, allow them, and I think to your point, the key of that, and this is actually probably more an outcome, the key outcome of saving that time is they can put their focus back into where it needs to be on the business, which should have big returns in other areas of the business. What are other benefits of them using you guys for this service?
They have a team of experienced entrepreneurs that have been in the game for more than 20 plus years, and I think it's like all the combined experience is like 70 plus years, and so they also get hands-on experience with them as well. And
Yeah. That's great. So I agree. Experience and expertise, let me put this back in present mode, is definitely a big benefit because it kind of goes back into that time savings, but also ideally back to outcomes. It'll provide a better outcome to the business because they'll probably get more accurate accounting done faster and hopefully better candidates in the door, higher quality, better recruiting process. Anything else?
Trying to think, not that I can think of.
So let's open it up to the group. A lot of you guys are small businesses. You are probably in the ICP that they would sell to. What do you think other benefits of that service would be? Or outcomes? Larger network when it comes to recruiting. Absolutely. Yeah.
Could be a more professional accounting system, so you've got people who's doing it on the side, it's been professional.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, more experience, better outcomes, better qualified. Are you talking about candidates?
So it is the same thing, it's all back on both sides, or the recruiting side, or even you can focus on your business, not what you are trying to.
Absolutely. Yeah. As a business owner, you're already wearing 15 hats. Yes.
Say accountability and less stress.
I love that. Accountability. It takes a little bit of the accountability off your plate and less stress.
Yeah. Thank you. I definitely agree.
Any last thoughts? Cool. There you go. Some new benefits. So now that we've talked about benefits, and we talked some already about outcomes. So I think those benefits very clearly relate to more time for the entrepreneur or business owner to invest back into their business. I think you would want to dig deeper in discovery to figure out what that means for them.
Okay.
Your ability to quantify that outcome. So if you said, hey, if I could give you 10 hours back a week or X hours back a month, what do you think you would do with that time? What impact would that have on the business? And ideally, you can somewhat get to a quantifiable number or,
Okay.
something there. Back to that outcome. And then let's talk about challenges. So what challenges would a business typically face that they would be very interested in this offering into these benefits?
Probably the lack of tools needed for accounting as well, or even to pitching in front of investors, as well as like having a set budget and knowing what to do, because we also do financial projections as well.
Okay.
So that's one aspect.
That was like 3 aspects. I love it.
All right, sweet. Okay, so and on the recruiting side, again, more qualified candidates that fit well with the company as well. And depending on exactly what the company needs, you can get part-time as well as full-time, and not just contractors as well. So
Yeah.
in that aspect.
We'll open it back up to the group. What are challenges that a business might face that this service would just be so valuable? I mean, for one, the entrepreneur could be working insane hours trying to get all this done and working on weekends. It could be impacting their product roadmap. It could be impacting their ability to, add things to their product or service because they're spending so much time on this. So a lot of it, again, comes back to that time savings. Other thoughts? Yeah.
Well, if they're doing recruiting, that's for all personnel, not just accountants.
Yes.
So you could obviously, it's that person you can halfway. I think I was finished, but
Yeah.
just saying that by having a recruiting mechanism, you can build your workforce more efficiently and have the right people in place.
Exactly. And to that point, too, a business may be struggling to get good talent in the door. They may have job recs open for an insane period of time.
I think one of the challenges is inertia. You don't hire somebody every day. You don't need to do accounting every day, so you have to prove the value of this up front. So they've been doing it somehow already.
Absolutely. Other challenges? One more?
Financially, I like the fact that it has a flat service fee, and I think that's good. Oh, financially, for startups, it may not be as affordable to just go ahead and hire a team of 100 from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. So it could help their recruiting costs to have like temporary contract help, things like that, by the recruiting team. Cool. So again, I think, oh, one more. What's the price? What is the price range?
Well, I can't give that information now, but if you want to meet for some coffee, I mean, I'm totally down for that.
I'm sure it depends a lot on
Yeah,
the
really, and ultimately, it really.
amount of time they need to spend with your team.
Exactly. It really depends on what's going on with the company and exactly what's how much activity is going on. So it's just that super flexible flat fee price.
Cool. So thank you for volunteering. I think, yeah, we'll skip questions for now. Thank you for volunteering. So let's sum up what we talked about. So we talked about how the features or what the service does is provide services to small businesses to take accounting, some financial projection planning, and recruiting off their plate. The key benefits it offers is it gives those entrepreneurs more time back in their day to focus on the things that they are experts at, which should relate back to increased revenue, increased production, efficiency in the business. The challenges they would face is that they're struggling with those things today, so they don't have enough time to get the things they need to get done in their business. So I think that all will translate really well into a value prop. The last piece on here, questions that we're kind of skipping for now, is then to figure out how you run a proper discovery process to really make sure the person needs what you have to offer and to quantify that value. You'll want to go through what questions should I ask to uncover those challenges to be able to point out those benefits, but we'll wait on that. So thank you. Let's give them a quick round of applause.
Thank
I guess I'm going to keep it on. Okay. So the conclusion of that is focus on outcomes. So when you do that exercise, you write it up on a board. Some of my clients have found that they actually uncovered more things than they really realized were there. Sometimes, especially if you're a technical founder, you get so stuck in the day-to-day of what your product does, and you're probably agonizing over, oh, there's so much more I want it to do, and we can never move as fast as we want to because we don't have an army of developers. But with that said, there's typically more value in what you offer than you may even think. So I encourage you to do the exercise, spend time with your team thinking about it, and the key then is focus on those business outcomes. So you may find there are 100 softwares out there that can all drive a certain outcome, like helping to put time back in an entrepreneur's day that allows them to focus on what they need to focus on. But the way that you and your company does it very specifically will meet very specific needs. And so your ability to focus on the business outcomes, how your features and benefits impact the bottom line at the end of the day, but then how you uniquely do it, that combination is what allows you to have really great sales conversations and win somebody over. So you want to think through again, what are the business outcomes that we drive? How specifically do we do this in a unique way? And how do we do it better than every other option out there? Better than doing it yourself, better than, I don't know if there's some technologies that would help them do this, like better than just using QuickBooks. So being very clear about not just what you do, but how it differs. So then once you have all that, I think creating the value prop is a little bit of science. It's a bit of art. And you'll want to just test it in the field and see what reactions you get to it. But here's an example. So again, we start with what the company did, what Terminus did, and then we ended with the outcomes that it drives. So Terminus enables B2B marketers to proactively reach the decision makers at their high-value target accounts with display ads wherever they go online. And at the end of the day, this helps them to improve conversion rates through the funnel and increase revenue. Now, my reps in the field would probably take out maybe wherever they go online. They may make this a little bit briefer so it's not too much of a mouthful, but our sales team would consistently give this type of message when someone just asks you high level, what do you do? So instead of going into this long tirade, which a lot of times when I ask a startup founder, what do you do? It takes them 15 minutes to tell me. You want to have some sort of simple version that says what you do, why it's valuable, And that's the core of your value prop. And then you'll have like a longer version. So this is like the brief value prop / elevator pitch. And then you'll have a bigger story that you tell around that value prop that really gives someone more detail about what you do and really why you do it. So we'll pause there for a second. Any questions? Who wants to take a stab at the value prop for Headway? Why don't you try, Gunter? Here, you got the mic back? Okay. Headway allows you to?
Focus more on your product / service so that way you're able to grow and scale your business.
Yeah, Headway is able to, you want to say a little bit about what you do, is able to take off the burden of doing your own accounting and recruiting with our 18 years of expertise, enabling you as a business owner to focus more on investing in your business and doing what matters to you. That's not perfect, but that's kind of how I'd start to sum that up. Start with what you do, what Headway does, and then what the business value is.
Okay.
Cool. So that's where I would start. The core of any conversation is the value prop. Then there's another layer to it. So if you have a value prop that's very dry and it is valuable, that still sometimes doesn't resonate with your buyer. And so when I was talking to Tim, who sells to nonprofits, he was kind of sharing how his story is a key piece of the sale. His buyer, a nonprofit, is especially interested in their why or their story. But I would argue that in virtually any business, this is super impactful. I believe it's a big reason why Pardot won as much as we did in those early days against much bigger, more well-funded competition is because we had a very compelling why and story. We were able to speak a lot to the mission that we were on. And so especially as a startup, do not underestimate the power of your story. A lot of you are starting companies because it came from some clear passion or a problem that you're solving. One of your peers in the building, for those of you who work here, Motivo, Rachel, the CEO there, was a clinical director, I believe, at an agency that does therapy. Forgetting the right names for it, but she was a therapist, and she saw very clearly herself the struggles that pre-licensed therapists went through to get their licensure. So it was a problem that really gave her a lot of pain. She saw a lot of people on her team go through, and she wanted to help solve that. And so when she explains that to a prospect, I've been in your shoes, I know what it feels like, and I know what that pain looks like. Here's why I built my product. That really resonates. So not everybody will have that same kind of story that's uber connected to their buyer, but you want to be able to both tell your story and sell the vision of where you're going. Again, as a startup, your product may be here and you want it to be here. That's okay, but you have to get some of those early customers and get revenue in the door so you can get it to here. And so your ability to tell a big and compelling story that makes people want to join you will be a great way to get people in the door. Now, you never want to lie. Let me be clear. When I say sell the vision, it doesn't mean lie about what you do, but you can point towards where you're headed as a business. So I'll give you an example. At Terminus, we sold the vision of account-based marketing. Now, account-based marketing is a strategy, not a technology. Our tool was not account-based marketing. However, we started by selling the vision of what an account-based marketing strategy could do for a business, and we got the person to say, yeah, that sounds good. Then we would flip it to, well, great, we are the best partner you could possibly choose to help you launch this strategy. So it was something like, here's what you're doing today, and according to Forrester, less than 1% of leads are turning into revenues. So this model clearly has worked for a lot of businesses, the lead gen typical funnel, but it's not very efficient. And so when you flip the funnel and take an account-based approach to your marketing efforts, you'll find that it is a much more efficient way to drive revenue. Instead of filling the funnel with a lot of wasted leads, instead focus on identifying top accounts that will produce the most revenue for your business, the best fits. Expand your reach within those accounts to find the entire buying committee and be able to speak to all of them, be able to engage those buyers across as many channels as possible with compelling, relevant messaging. And at the end of the day, that should turn them into not just customers, but advocates of your brand that spread the word and more magical things happen. So we had this kind of vision that we would sell, and the marketer would say, yeah, I want that, or I'm kind of sort of trying to do that now. And again, then we'd turn the tables and say, great, well, we come in at the expand and engage stages. Our product helps you, and back to that value prop, proactively reach the right buyers in your target accounts with display ads wherever they go online. This is going to enable you at the end of the day to increase the velocity through the funnel. So we may not increase leads, you may have less companies you're working with, but they're going to go through your funnel at a higher conversion rate, and ultimately that's going to lead to more revenue for your business because you were so focused. And so if we had just said, we have an advertising solution, it's kind of like retargeting, except for it's a little bit more proactive, so you can target the right people and the right businesses. If we had just simply said what we do, it's advertising, we would have gotten put into a box with a bunch of advertising agencies. The way that we made our messaging and our vision feel bigger than just being a very simple advertising platform was by, again, creating this vision, selling that we could help them accomplish a much bigger strategy. So, I kind of got lucky at Terminus that we caught on to this ABM thing that gained a lot of momentum. Not all of us will be so lucky to always have this hot thing that is popular for a while that you can kind of follow, but all of us can find a way to tell our story and to tell our vision in a way that can really connect with our buyers and help them see not only where we are now, but where they can go with a relationship with us. Does anyone have an example? Do any of you have something unique you think about your story that's helped you to get some early momentum or traction? Yeah. Here, I'll just give you some.
So we have a social media platform. You guys have heard of social media before, right? So you see the problem. Or the solution is that our social media platform actually allows people to make recommendations within their social network. So I don't want a recommendation from everyone. I want a recommendation from someone I know.
Yeah, and so what specifically do you think has helped you in your business? Like, what part of that story do you think has resonated most with your buyer?
Because our buyer generally is the business who wants to be included in that recommendation. And so they understand that people go to people they know for a recommendation. They want that referral from their former customers. They want that referral from people who actually have used the service, can actually say something about their service and sort of be their spokesperson on the street.
Yeah, their ability to capture their customers, to find more customers. And that goes actually back to the advocate piece. Yeah. Cool. Other thoughts? Anything that's helped your business? Tim, do you want to share? He's like, dang it, I should have talked to her before. You don't have to, but if you want to, she's got a microphone.
Yeah, I think one thing unique to us is, so we sell to nonprofits to help them raise more money through corporate matching gifts. So I think our founder, as well as everyone in our company, has probably worked for a larger, maybe a Fortune 500, who has had a matching gift program. Maybe you've donated to a nonprofit, but you never went through and completed the matching gift. So we try to retell that story of our own, our own examples of not completing that matching gift, not doubling our donation to the nonprofit, and that's what we try to solve with our platform. So I think that does help.
And that probably builds trust in that buyer, that because you know the problem, you wouldn't have started a business like this if you weren't motivated to help solve that.
Completely.
So it doesn't always have the highest margins, maybe. I'm making that up. Could be not the case. But anyway, yes, that's great. Thank you for sharing. Sorry that I basically forced you to share that. All right, so ICP. I think everybody knows this term, but I always want to hesitate from assuming. So this is really the description of the company that is the perfect fit for your solution. So not the individual buyer or end user, but the company. What does a company look like? So when we started at the beginning, I said there were 3 foundational pieces of that you need in place to really build a sales team. And the first was your value prop and your story. The next is knowing who you sell to and really defining what that ideal customer profile is a big key to make sure you stay focused and efficient in your outreach. So here's an example of an ICP. This is, again, I'm just using my last company's example. We sold to B2B software companies with 200 to 10,000 employees using Salesforce and a marketing automation technology. Now, honestly, the tricky part was the tech piece. It's not always easy to tell if a company's using those technologies up front, but we invested in software that allowed us to like Ghostery and Datanize to get a better feel for which companies were using what types of technology. So this is important to give you a direction on where to go. Now, if you're super early, you may not know 100%, that's fine, but still make an assumption, make a definition, and then go through and find a systematic way to prove that assumption. So make sure that if you don't really know who your ICP should be, whatever CRM you're using, or even if it's an Excel sheet, you kind of want to mark these things so that you can go back and say, okay, over the last 3 months, I've called 500 companies, and 25% were fintech, 25% were software, 25% were X or were Y, and I found that we got the most meetings set with this. But interestingly, we got less meetings set with medical. However, the conversion rates were higher. But being kind of intentional about tracking the different components that you think make up your ICP will help you to hone in over time. And again, that's something your investors will be really impressed with. If they think that you're being scientific in proving out who your target market is, they will be excited to see that. So keeping data points, like it varies based on what you do, but like industry, employee size, maybe technology, maybe use case, things like that are valuable to track. One of my clients upstairs, Grayscale, needs to track the ATS system. They think that might have something to do with how likely they are to buy. Total addressable market, we'll just briefly touch on this. So your TAM, or your total addressable market, is the approximate number of companies, but really revenue value there is out there that you can win. So this is also really important in general for your strategy, but also if you want to raise money to know what that size is. So if you have a total addressable market of like $10 million, you don't want to go take $50 million of funding, right? So that needs to be in alignment based on the size of your market. So the total addressable market is really using data tools to estimate the number of companies that match that ICP. So let's say at Terminus, unfortunately our ICP was smaller than we expected because we require those software tools. We found there were like 12,000 companies that met our criteria. And you're not going to win all of them, let's be honest, but there are 12,000 companies that met that criteria, and then within that we knew our average deal size was $30,000. So we can start to do math to say today our TAM is X, and let's say we win 30% of that market, that is Y. And we came to the conclusion that we need to find ways to grow our TAM. So we had to build things into the product to help us have a wider audience we could sell to. So defining that is important. And then, of course, that last piece is defining your persona, so the people within the accounts that will buy from you. Now, you may be lucky and have 1 or 2 key personas. So for us, we sold to marketing. We had 3 personas within marketing, but they weren't too drastically different. One of my clients, Key Factor, has a super enterprise technical sale, and they have like 7 personas from the CISO to IT operations to the security team to developers and so forth. So you want to think about what are the different people in the business that might be stakeholders in the evaluation. And I'd really encourage you to take that one step further and not just define who they are, but then think through what do they care about? What keeps a CMO or VP of marketing up at night versus what keeps a demand gen manager up at night? And understanding what each of them thinks about, cares about, and spends their time doing helps you when you share that value prop. So when it comes to like segmenting your audience, the value prop is the same for everybody. That core value prop of what your product does and why it's valuable, that shouldn't change. However, then the story that goes with it or the way that you present value to a specific person could vary based on their persona. So when I talk about segmentation, what I mean is when you think about messaging in a sales conversation, but also in like your outbound emails or cold outreach, it's important to think about segmenting your audience or usually your personas into what messaging will resonate with what audience. This may be based on title persona, it may be more based on vertical, it may be product line, use case, technology, ATS they're using, any number of things. So let me define that a little bit more, but quick note, you want to choose the minimum number of segments as possible. So there's probably, 25, 50 ways you could slice and dice your audience, but that is way too much. So you want to find what is the minimum number of segments that I can use to get the maximum benefit. So for us, for instance, CMO and VP, we group together. Demand gen and kind of director of marketing, we grouped together. So we had our 2 core ones, and then we kind of had field marketing as a separate persona. So we had 3. Now, persona is a little bit different than segment. Sometimes they're synonymous, sometimes they're not. So again, you may have a couple different personas, but your messaging is the same. So Guntor, back to your example, you may sell to CEOs, C-levels, founders, and the message to a CFO may not be that different than a CEO and founder. It may be largely the same for that team, but maybe the message is a little bit different based on what you're leaning towards. Recruiting services versus financial, or it may be different based on size of business, or I don't know, whatever it is. So you want to think based on your business, what makes the most sense to segment your messaging. And then you want to think about what is the messaging that will resonate with each. So I'll give you a quick example. For VP C-level, they're more focused on revenue into the business as they should be. So a CMO is focused on all the marketing efforts that we're doing. How are they translating into revenue at the end of the day? Our value prop worked really, really well for them, but we rarely got to speak with them. So when we got to speak with them, it was very clear for us to say, we're helping you do this tactical thing in this way, but at the end of the day, it's helping you talk to more of the most valuable accounts you could speak with. And by getting your sales team, not necessarily more leads or more at-bats, but more at-bats with best fit companies that have a higher spend value to the business, we're going to help you ultimately bring in more revenue, even at your same conversion rates, but we can also help you improve your conversion rates. When we spoke to a director of marketing or demand gen, they're a lot more tactical. They're typically thinking about leads. And so that conversation was much harder because we did not deliver leads. So we had to have a conversation. Our messaging to them was more like, so what are you trying to accomplish? They would say, generate leads. Why? Why is that your goal? Well, ultimately, you'd get them to say, because I want to generate more pipeline for sales. I can't control what happens to the pipeline after that, but really, as a marketer, I'm in charge of pipeline. Great. So our tool can help you generate more pipeline in this way, very tactically. And so that message was mostly the same, but you see it's a little bit different. Cool. So, filter, but I would say it's not necessarily leads. Often it's done more at the company level. It's a mix of company and contacts based on variables that are important to your business. So this will help. Let's do another exercise. Can we get a different volunteer? This one will be a little bit easier. We're just going to talk about segmenting your market. Somebody in the back who hasn't spoken much? Yeah, come on up, please. Okay. So we're just going to go through these questions with them. What is your ICP? Who are your key personas? And then let's brainstorm as a team what their segments might be and how different messaging will be. Thank you for volunteering. Will you share your name and your company?
Hi. My name is Matt Ethington. Our company is Chronic Care IQ, and we monitor patients through technology that empower doctors to provide better care and make more money.
Cool. Who is your ICP?
Our ideal customer persona are independent cardiology practices and independent internal medicine practices.
Okay. What is the size of these businesses? When you say independent, are they smaller businesses?
Anywhere from 5 to 100 physicians.
Okay, so it can go quite a. What are the key personas within that? What people do you sell to?
We actually speak quite often to chief medical officers,
Okay.
Quality directors, and CEOs.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about segmentation. Do you think it would be based on those 3 personas primarily, or might it also be different based on size of business? Like, what are the different ways you might segment your story or your message?
Yeah, we craft the story depending, are we speaking on the administrative side or are we speaking on the clinical side? Because the physicians themselves, they're motivated by better patient care, better profitability. On the administrative side, they're motivated by, will you become another problem in my already overburdened day? So they're often more of they can say no, but they can't say yes.
So when we think about the profiles you said, the chief medical officer, where do they fall into those 2 categories you shared?
often the lead influencer
Okay.
would,
Are they more administrative or more?
they walk on both sides. So
Okay.
they're the clinical representative to the administration team.
Okay, and you said the two categories were clinical and administrative.
Yes,
So this version of a CMO, Chief Medical Officer, sits between the two.
yes.
Both would appeal to them. And do you typically have to have a conversation and one might be the better messaging or the other? Or you need to form a message that incorporates both messages into it?
There's three,
Okay,
right? Because there's the clinical conversation, and then there's also the administrative conversation. And then there's the one that you build so that you are advocating the administrative person so that they're advocating back for you while you're building in the clinical benefits so the doctors will understand. And then you act like money's not a big deal because cardiologists are concerned only about patient care, but money's always a big deal. So you have to build the revenue side back in. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah,
It's
so-
a complicated sale.
it sounds like a complicated sale. So I love the group to chime in a second. It sounds like there might be three main segments, but that they overlap. So one is for someone who's very stuck on the administrative side. You would be speaking to them more about the administrative benefits
Yes.
of what you do. On the clinical side, obviously more of the clinical benefits, improvement in patient care. And then there's some personas like that CMO where you really need to have both of those messages more clearly together in one, so that you may have three different messages.
That's correct.
Yeah, would you say, is there any other group that doesn't fit into those categories?
No. I mean, they fit, I can't think of one. And I think the chief medical officer has to speak about the efficiency of delivering better care, which benefits administrative
Yeah.
and reducing the burden.
Yeah. So this one actually seems pretty cut and dry. Maybe there's two main segments, but kind of that third that blends the two together. And so that is not necessarily based on the title or persona. Maybe a little bit, but it sounds like to some degree it may depend on who you're speaking to. I'm sure at times you get one person who is on like a more medical, clinical title that might actually care a little bit more about the administrative benefits and vice versa. So maybe there's a little bit of exploring with that person to understand what they care about, to figure out what message resonates.
Yeah, it's a job of finding the champion, right? Who really, it's not hard to get a doctor to say yes.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep administration from saying no.
Got it. Any other thoughts? That one actually seems, yeah.
Matt, what about the patient testimonials, or does this just run in the background? The chronic care IQ?
So there are a lot of patient testimonies. We keep 29.3% of patients out of the hospital. So there's a 91% satisfaction rate. And so that always features into the value prop. It doesn't prevent administration from saying no. They're very focused on, can we afford it? Are we going to do it? How long will it take? If it requires extra people, where do I staff them? Where do I put them? But patient satisfaction is now, it's becoming increasingly important in how Medicare scores practices and how they get paid. So that's an emerging benefit. You think it'd be the forefront, but it's not.
So the last piece of this is, how does that then apply to messaging? So let's say a salesperson at your company is cold calling, trying to set up meetings. How do they know what message resonates? When they're emailing a CMO, how different is that email copy than if they're emailing like more of a medical professional? And so the next piece is thinking, how then do you take that messaging that applies to that segment and create email copy that would resonate with them? So a lot of mistakes I see early stage startups doing is they want to put their whole generic value prop into an email and assume that everyone cares about the same things. But obviously, there would be a difference in that approach. So what you might send to a doctor saying, hey, we as a business, your message about what you do is basically the same. We help you do X, but that's going to drive better patient outcomes for you. We work with companies like X, Y, and Z, and they've seen less patients going back to the hospital, X and Y. Would love to chat with you about this. Whereas if you're speaking to someone on the administrative side, instead the email may be, we do X, the same exact thing we said in the other email, but we're helping customers to see that they're reducing their patient costs. I'm probably saying that's all wrong.
But you got it. I mean, you're hitting it.
And in these, customers like X, Y, and Z have found that we were able to help with X, Y, and Z. And so again, it's very similar, but it's just that little bit different, and that should resonate with that persona.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Matt. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you for volunteering. Okay, for the sake of time, we'll move on. I would have loved to have done one more so you can see the differences, because another of you may come up here and your segmentation would be based on totally different criteria. So last, let's talk about sales process. Sales process is tricky, and so my biggest recommendation to you is do not say, Sales Loft is a really successful company, let me just take what they do. Or Farmed is a really successful company, we have kind of a similar business model, let me take what they do. The tricky thing is that every business is different, and if you take someone else's playbook and try to put it on your business, it will not work. Every business is unique, and the point of a sales process is to figure out how your buyer wants to be communicated with, how they buy, what they need to know. And so I think using what has worked for other businesses as a framework can be a valuable place to start, but make sure you're listening to your buyer. And if having a 5-step sales process is making your buyer mad at you, don't do it. If you need to have 10 steps in your sales process to get your super technical product sold, then that's fine. So figure out what works for you, but it's all about how do we get to the finish line as quickly and efficiently as possible. So here are the key elements you need to think about when you create a basic sales process. And I will say the first 2 things you really should have defined before you bring salespeople into the business. This is one that, depending on the talent of your first sales hire or hires, you may entrust to them to figure out. But this is something that should be treated as, it's an art and a science, but a little bit scientific. It should be documented and tried and followed so that you can optimize. You can't optimize or iterate anything that you don't have clearly defined. So the key things that you want to accomplish in the average sales process is there's some part of the process where you're sharing your story and your value prop at a high level, letting them get to know you and build some trust. There's some level where you're probably demonstrating the product or explaining the service in deeper detail. Setting proper expectations. This is more important for some businesses than others, but making sure that everyone's on the same page about how the commercial terms work, what the outcomes will be, etc. Discovery qualification. So you as a business need also to be qualifying if that customer is the right fit for you, in part so you don't waste your time, in part so you don't have churn because you convince someone to buy that shouldn't have. And then lastly, and this is really a loaded thing, even though it sounds simple, working out the commercial terms. So going through all the stuff you need to go through to work with the entire buying committee and make it happen. So let's talk a little bit more about how this might work. Here's an example. This slide's kind of ugly. Here's an example. This is what I see commonly in a lot of SaaS startup companies. There's typically 2 structured calls that have a pretty well-defined script, and then call 3 beyond starts to get a little hairy, but there's at least a path one would go down. And I'll show you an example of ours at Terminus in a minute. So call 1 typically is a blend of, it's qualification, confirming if it makes sense to embark on a journey together to evaluate the product or service. So the goal is for you selfishly, you're going to want to qualify the prospect and the account to see if it's a good fit for you. There is a level of qualifying the person you're speaking to. Does this person have any power in the organization? Can they get a deal done? Am I going to be wasting my time? And then the account. Does this company have the budget, the initiative, what they need to have to be the right fit? And then the other side of it is you need to be educating the prospect on your offering to help them confirm whether they're interested. So there's a dual commitment on that first call to really qualify. So the typical actions, normally the salesperson will share a high-level story, 2 to 5 slides, and basic product details. My strong encouragement would be, unless it's a really transactional one-call close product, don't show the product on call 1. I will say early in the days at Terminus, we felt it was appropriate to do that because nobody knew who the hell we were, and if we didn't show them something, they would not meet with us. So we did, and that was fine at the time, but we very quickly changed it. So I'm not saying this always has to happen this way, but most of the time you want to be having more of a conversation and talk about value. So asking discovery. So normally, by the end of that call, there should be a basic level of, are you interested? Do you think this will meet what you're looking for? And do I think you're the right fit for what I'm looking for? Now, in practice, you should have a clearly defined doc that outlines what you're looking for. So I guess at Headway, you may have, I need to understand the size of the business, the specific pain points they're facing, because if they're not having pain in this or that area, we know the call is going to be a waste of time. I don't know. So you want to have very clearly defined what are the things the rep needs to gather to know this is the right fit, and what are the things that you need to tell that prospect every time. This actually sounds trivial, but it's a really important point. A lot of startups, every time they talk to someone, they say different things on the call depending on how they feel, and they're like, that was a great call. But then when they meet with the person again, they don't remember what they said. So by being very clear on what you are going to relay to the prospect every time on a first call, it makes sure there's consistency in what they're learning as well. Call 2 is typically really where you start to sell. This is where you confirm the business value specific to this customer. So you told me that you are trying to increase revenue by 20% this year. And specifically, you guys are trying, your CEO has said that the account-based approach is the right way for you. And on the flip side, I've shared with you that I believe we can support that by, and I would very clearly define, my product can help you proactively reach the marketing team at your 100 top accounts. And we're going to help you to ... in these ways. And by increasing your footprint in these accounts, it should lead to X% higher revenue or X% higher deals, and that should help to get you to that 20%. So I would kind of lay all that out and then say, what do you think? Instead of assuming or just rushing to get them on the next call, I would always encourage you at the end of this call too, or wherever it's appropriate in your sales process, to actually ask the prospect. Do you, after I've told you how I think this meets your need, do you think this is valuable? Because sometimes if you ask the question, they will say no, and that's fine. I mean, you may want to try to get one more thing, and well, why do you say that, and try to combat it, but if they don't find it valuable, then stop wasting your time. On the flip side, if they say any version of yes, maybe, kind of, sort of, you're saying there's a chance, and that's where it's like, okay, great. Now let's work together to figure out how to sell this into your business. So that's normally what I see on a call 1 and a call 2. The actions there are typically to dive into a deeper product demo, sometimes to present a business case, and to start to understand the customer's internal buying process. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on differing that process on inbound versus outbound? Point being, like inbound, you probably have some sort of marketing qualification. So for us, it's more about
Totally.
a discovery call, understanding operations, and talk more in terms of that time recording call, and then potentially jumping on a demo in that call at a high level.
That's a fair point. I do think the inbound versus outbound can impact the way, especially on the first call, you run things. At the end of the day, no matter what, you want to understand, especially on inbound, what are you looking for? Why did you take this call? But even on outbound, I called you out of the blue, which is the worst thing. Why did you agree to talk to me? So I think there's similarity in that. Either way, you still want to qualify what they're trying to accomplish, what pain points they have. But certainly you may structure the calls differently.
What about the demo part of it? We've got,
Meaning doing a demo on call 1 if it's inbound?
I used to be we wanted to qualify and set up a separate demo, but what we found was we had prospects like we were adding friction to the sales cycle. They're like, I don't want to.
What's the average deal price of your product or service?
Our average license value is about $15K right now.
Per the year? 15K per year on average, okay. So not super transactional, but not super enterprise either.
And way more complex than it probably should be in the industry.
What industry is it in?
We sell seat-to-sale software to the cannabis industry.
Okay.
Operators don't really, their idea of technology is applicable.
Okay, so that's a great point. So that's where we go back to don't ever try to take someone else's model and put it on your business. I think if you have a model where there's a less technical buyer that doesn't typically buy technology, they are less used to, when I sell to a B2B marketer, they know, salesperson's never going to show me the product on call 1, like they get it, right? I think that's fine if you feel like you need to do that, but what you want to do then is give your sales team guardrails, because if they're just going to get in the product, the temptation is going to be to show up and throw up. And back to the whole power dynamic of a sale, the buyer has most of the power. You have a little bit of power as a salesperson. And if you give that all to the buyer by telling them everything they need to know up front, you lose that. And they don't ever have to come talk to you again. Not that you should be strong-arming someone into having a second meeting, but there's a certain level where you should be keeping something back for the next conversation. So I would say if you feel like you need to show the product, be limited in what you show and say something like, look, this first call is just designed to see whether or not there's a mutual fit. We found that showing this part of our product can give you an idea of how it works. But just to be clear with you, like it's not going to be a full product demo today. We'd want to dive in deeper. And then you would still probably want to have 3 to 5 questions you ask up front before you dive in. Start to show them the product. And the best thing you can do is discovery while you're in the product. It doesn't have to be one or the other. So you show a feature and you say, how do you do this today? Show another feature today. How impactful might this be for you? You know, you kind of ask those questions as you're in there. And then after you get to the end of what you want to show, you say, okay, for the sake of time, we've got 10 minutes left. Let's stop there. But tell me what you think so far. Is this interesting? What would you want to know more about? Okay, great. I'll show you this, this, and this next time. Sorry, one last point on that. I think it's always should be a give and take no matter what. Honestly, the best discoveries are rarely, let me ask you 50 questions and then let me show you 3 slides and you sit there quietly. Usually there is a mix of, let me ask you some questions. I'll show you a slide. Let me ask you more, and kind of back and forth.
Do you lump in like CRM activities and onboarding and things like that into here, or are those separate processes?
Looking at, you
Kinda
said
like the
activity
onboarding after
metrics.
sale, like so immediately after sale, if you start an onboarding process or something, do you lump that in here, or do you consider that like a separate process?
A separate process. I think depending on the product, they may be more interrelated than others. But yes, typically you will have the sales process that will end with a sale and then kind of a handoff and a separate process that takes over. Okay, we are almost up on time, so I'm going to try to fly through the rest of this. This is just an example. Figure out what works in your business, but the key takeaway is you want to be as scientific about it as possible. You want to document. You want to have clear goals for each step of the process of what you want to give to the prospect and answer for them and what you want to gain at each step. But if you find that something's not working, the prospect's annoyed, or they want to learn more information faster, switch it around. Just if you're going to give more information quicker, just make sure you take the time to think through if a couple prospects complain a couple times, but more prospects are going through the sales process doing it this way, it may make sense to hold some information back. And then if you have a really technical sale, you may have 3 or 4 more demos after that, technical deep dives, things will vary. Oh yeah, I was going to show you, we don't have much time for this, so this will be something else I can send out afterwards, and this is really small. But this is how we structured it at Terminus, where we had kind of a milestone guide there were 3 key deal milestones that we had in the sales process that you needed to accomplish in each. And then within them, we had kind of a guide for how you run a call. So a call 1, and once reps were up in the business, they could structure the call any way they wanted to, but we knew this was a model that worked. And so we'd start with an intro and agenda, we'd go to our discovery process, we had a discovery guide they would reference for what information they needed to gather for success. We had the whole flip my funnel story that I kind of went through with you that we would share. Then we briefly had 1 slide that explained how our product worked. It was very high level, it was not in the weeds, but we'd say, let me just make sure you leave this call knowing what we do. We'd explain it. And then we essentially start to wrap up. And then from there, our call 2, we had a specific way that we got into the demo and so forth. So if you're a young company, you may not have something as formal as this. Don't be intimidated by this doc. I'll send it to you so you can look at it. The key is just document it, be thoughtful about it. If something doesn't work, fix it, tweak it, iterate. Okay, lastly, I'll sum this last part up because we're at the end of, are we at the end of time? Oh, I was thinking this end at 1:30. Okay, never mind, we got more time. Okay, so here's the fun part. And this is the part that some of you who do not have sales backgrounds will not think is the fun part. And this is why you typically want to hire a salesperson eventually if you're a founder who's selling. So once you get to the part, so we just talked about, really the first calls, 1, 3, 4 calls in the series are just getting someone to explain to you what they're trying to accomplish, for you to introduce what you do to them and get to the point where you can say, here's what we do in this way. Are you interested? Once the prospect agrees that your product or service is valuable and can meet a need, that's really where you move from opposite sides of the table to sitting on the same side of the table. So when you start a conversation, there's not trust, right? You're having to earn that trust and respect. in my opinion, once someone says to me, yes, I think your product is valuable, all of a sudden, like, we're friends. So me and you, work together to sell this to your business. We're on the same team. We're on the same side. You said you like this. Let me help you make it happen. So the language you use starts to change, and the relationship with change. So now the tricky part is managing that deal to a close. So to do so, you need to understand the buyer's buying process. This can be really tedious, and I will say this is more or less important depending on how enterprise your sale is. So if you're selling a product that's $50, $100 a month, month to month, then there'll be very little of this that you need to do. One of my clients sells $1 million deals, and this is a huge part of their sale. So you need to understand their buying process, and typically you can't ask these questions until you've earned their trust. So that's where you start to ask clear, and you want to be careful asking who else is involved so you don't offend the person, but say something like, clearly you are a key stakeholder in this evaluation, but who else on your team helps you to make this decision? How does your team make decisions? / do you have any key criteria you're using to evaluate vendors, to evaluate partners? Are there some specific must-haves? I need to know about that. When will you make a decision, and when would you want to start? Those are two different dates. I'd have so many reps that are like, yeah, they love it. They want to buy. Okay, well, for one, why? What is the value for them? But then when? When did they tell you they want to buy? Like next year or tomorrow? Because that makes a big difference in what we should be doing to get the deal closed. And understanding when do you want to start versus when do you want to make a decision. Because if somebody wants to start September 1st, we may say, well, once you sign a contract with us, it takes 2 weeks to get into onboarding. Once you're in onboarding, it's about 4 weeks to get implemented. So if you want to start September 1st, we really need to be started by, mid-July. Like, we need to get started now. So your ability to understand what they're trying to accomplish and work backwards. And then, of course, back to the whole value conversation that I have said over and over. What are they trying to accomplish? What challenges are they facing? Your ability to understand that will help you in getting your deal passed through. Because let's say you're talking with your champion, and then you have to go present to their boss, the chief medical officer. If you were really good at your discovery with that person, you should then be taking that information and building the business case back to other personas and stakeholders in the business. So Mr. CMO, Chief Medical Officer of this very big hospital system, I talked to 4 people on your staff, and they have said that these are things that are keeping them up at night that they're worrying about. I believe our solution can help you solve these things, but also can solve some of the things probably keeping you up at night about revenue in your hospital system. And then lastly, why should they choose you? So back to, there's a million options out there, from doing nothing to probably lots of competition, maybe even other companies you wouldn't consider direct competition. If the prospect considers it competition, it's competition. So why should they choose you? If you don't know the answer to that, there's risk in your deal. So if I were to ask you about a deal that you're about to close, and I were to ask these questions, would you know the answers to all of them? Who in here is a salesperson? When's the last time that you had a deal where you couldn't answer these questions, and did you win that deal? Thanks, JC.
I don't know if I could tell you how long ago per se, but I've closed a few with maybe not knowing all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, usually more just because I know what the value is and what their need is.
Yeah.
So we may not need some of the other.
You're able to push
factors.
a little bit more on those levels.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it also depends on like I said, the complexity of the sale. The lower the price point, the more likely it is that you can get someone excited about something and overlook some of this. The more money they're going to be spending or investing with you, the more that you need to know these things.
Yeah. At the end of the day, though, you probably should know those.
Yeah. Were you going to add anything, Kirk?
I've always related sales to high school dating, and if you can't answer those questions, you're not going to get a date. I mean, it's pretty simple. And it's also when somebody's sitting there and they're stringing you along, and you're like, well, you ought to be able to close this deal, but they don't want to, and they start giving all their reasons why. I sit back and I say, well, that sounds like the person you were going out with, but you wouldn't take her to the prom.
I like the analogy. Mike, you've been smiling. Have you? Have you experienced this as well? Are you sales?
Yes,
Microphone's behind you. Thank you.
So my software, my company sells co-working management software to workspaces kind of like this. And definitely on the larger workspaces with thousands of people, it's a multiple month-long process. And when these aren't answered immediately, it just drags on and more calls, and absolutely, yeah.
Can you think of an example? Have you been in a pipeline meeting, your sales manager said, what do you commit? And you said, I commit WeWork or something. And then you didn't know there was somebody else in the buying committee and they shut down your deal, or you didn't know they had a key criteria and you didn't talk about how your product did it.
I've absolutely wasted time on people that, they were important, but they weren't the decision maker, and I spent too much time building that relationship, and then when it got down to the decision maker, the relationship wasn't there and it fell through. So,
Yeah. And typically that goes back to, I saw this a lot with my reps, a little bit of who's involved, but also, again, what are they trying to accomplish? What challenges are they facing? If you weren't taking good notes when you spoke to that lower level person, how are you going to make the business case to their boss? Leveraging what you've learned from them is really key there.
Yep.
Cool. All right, so these things are the things that are a little bit annoying to ask, at the end of the sales process, like, how will you make this decision? When will you buy? I know that can feel like a burden sometimes, especially if you're a founder and selling is not your main passion in life. So I'd encourage you to find ways to make these questions your own. I would always tell reps when they felt awkward asking something, how might you put it in your words that makes it feel, more conversational? And then just get over it, ask it anyway. Cool. Because if the buyer told you they're interested, they should be motivated to help you navigate their organization. So back to the getting on the same side of the table, I've had reps who were not successful who felt like, oh, I'm being such a burden. No, if the person is motivated to make a deal happen, then they should be working with you to work through these things. So removing objections. The other piece to managing the deal to close is removing the objections that are in your way. No matter what, almost every sale will have some form of objection, whether small, whether big, anything from pricing, price is too high, to I'm not sure if this meets my need, to X option seems like it might be the better fit, to silly, ridiculous things that you wonder, what is this person even thinking? So how does one remove objections that are in the way? The first is, are you going to chime in? Do you have an opinion? I'd love to hear it.
Ultimately, just try to get the trust and try to break those barriers. Like, for instance, oh, hey, do you know this person? Or, like, events and such.
What's an example? Can you think of a live example you had recently? Has someone said,
hey, I recognized you at this event at the healthcare. It was like a healthcare Atlanta Ventures meetup, and we just catch up and everything else.
What was the objection though?
Oh, the objection.
What is the main objection you get? Do people say it's too expensive? They can do it themselves for free?
Oh, you mean with Headway or? Oh, okay. Objection.
You get no objections in your sales process.
I'm just trying to think of one.
No worries. You don't have to think. Ooh. Yeah, but I imagine price is a big one that you would get, and I would think especially with a service that they could do in-house, that would be one you would get commonly. So let's talk about removing them. So the key is first acknowledge it. Don't pretend like it's not there and move on awkwardly, because the objection is still there whether you talk about it or not, so you might as well just bring it to the surface and have a conversation. So acknowledge it. Hey, I'm hearing you say this. It sounds like a problem. Is that a deal breaker for you? Or tell me more about what you're thinking about. So acknowledge it. Take the elephant out of the room. Have that conversation. Then you really need to get to the heart of what it is and why. So if someone says price is an issue, there's been a couple times in a deal cycle where we found someone said it's too expensive. And we said, well, what does that mean to you? Well, in my budget, I only have $15,000 left for the year. Okay, so you're not saying $30,000 in itself is too expensive. You're saying you're just limited on your budget for the rest of this calendar year. Okay, well, what if I was able to bill you for half of it this year and half of it in January when the budget turns around? Would that work? Yeah, that will work. And surprisingly, we've been able to very simply remove an objection without having to discount. So don't just, yeah, sure, I'll give you a discount, whatever you want. Slow down and ask, well, what is the problem? Why is that a problem for you? Sometimes you may need to go a step deeper if it's not as easy as the one I just shared and confirm what is the ideal solution. So you're telling me the price is too high. I asked you why, and you say, well, look, we're a startup. We just don't have a lot of money right now, and I'll be honest, you're a pretty new company. I don't know if you can provide me the ROI you're telling me that you can. So I just don't have that budget to pay. Okay, so what would the ideal solution be for you? You give me 50% off. And they'll probably say something a bit ridiculous, but just it's fair to ask, what is the ideal solution for you? What do you have in mind? Because sometimes they'll say, oh, well, if you could just take 5% off. It's like, let me talk to my manager, right? And you call 10 minutes later and you're like, my manager said yes, it was such a difficult thing to get this discount done, but if you can sign by today, let's make it happen. Or they say 50% off, and then you may or may not have a deal. So then you need to work through, okay, well, what I can commit to you is that I will do my absolute best to work with my manager and get you the best deal we can. I'll be honest, I don't know that I can get you 50% off, or you may just say, I cannot get you 50% off. I know that will not fly, but let me do my best. If I can commit to getting you, 10, 15% off, would that help to get you where you need to go? So you kind of just want to have that conversation to confirm, what do you think an ideal solution is? Often what you have shared with them and where they're at will be, a little bit distant. And then you want to try to figure out how to meet in the middle. And you may not be able to commit on that call. In fact, as a salesperson, even if I didn't have to ask my manager, like to get off the call and talk to my manager so I had time to just think through the situation instead of, blurting something out. But you always want to leave them with a confidence that I've heard your objection, I will do my best, let me see what I can do. And then you call them back and, have that conversation. I couldn't do X, but here's what I could do. Will that work? Let's make it happen.
In those instances, price is what you pay, value is what you get. They're talking about price, isn't there really a matter of you haven't proven the value?
Sure. So his question was, if they're talking about price, maybe you haven't proved the value. I think there's a blend of that. Sometimes no matter how much value you provide, there's still going to be a cost argument. But yes, in theory, if you've done a good enough job speaking to the business outcomes you can drive and trying to be able to quantify them. So in every business, you can't make an ROI calculator, but if you can get to that level with someone, back to our point when you were up here, Gunter, talking about headway and the outcomes you can drive for a business, if you've only said to someone, we can help you put more time back in your day, that's valuable, but maybe that doesn't warrant that I want to pay you $20,000 for services for the next year, right? But if I said, I think I can save you 40 hours a month that you can put back into your business, how do you think you'd spend that time if you had it? Well, I'd invest in doing more sales for the business. Okay, with 40 hours, how many more deals do you think you could bring into the business? Probably an extra 2 a month. What's your average deal size? $50,000? Okay, so you could bring in an extra $100,000 a month, and I'm asking you to pay $2,000 a month for my software. There's a really big ROI there, right? And so your ability to take it from, in theory, what I can do for you to a very specific business outcome is far more powerful because it really helps to quantify. So you can't do that in every sale, but what I always like to do was use averages. On average, our customers see this success, 30% improvement. If we could get you even 15% improvement, that would lead to X, and I'm asking you to spend Y. There's clearly an ROI here. What's the problem? And if the problem is I literally just don't have the budget, I'm new in the organization, my boss said no, then you may choose a discount. That's, you got to figure out from there what you do.
If you're going to discount, and instead of discount, what if you just remove some of the services if possible? If you could make some adjustments there.
Yeah, so Kirk asked, what about instead of discounting, you remove services? I think every situation is different. I always like to, instead of remove services, which is totally an option, would say we would throw something in. So we'll give you X for free, and it's typically worth X. And we had a couple of those things we purposely built into our pricing model that we could give for free that weren't a big cost to the business, but they were really valuable. So yeah, I think mechanisms like that work really well too. Yeah. Cool. I think that's the end of my slides. So we've got about 15 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions? Let me hand you this.
Yeah, let's say I've got a B2B SaaS app that's finally ready to be sold. How much do I need to spend on on the first salesperson to make the first deals who can do this?
Yeah.
And I mean specifics, base salary, commission, and ethically, how much runway do I have to give them on the, as a shot?
Runway meaning how long should you give them a chance?
Yeah.
Great question, Marshall. It's complicated because it depends on a lot of things. So if you were selling us enterprise software that's $500,000 and has a 12-month sales cycle, you need to give them 12 months, and you're going to need to pay them 120, 150K base salary and probably 150, 200K in commission. However, if you're selling a $1,000 a month product, base salary is probably going to be more like 50 to 60K, and an additional 60 to 100 in commission. So it depends very much on sales cycle length, complexity, deal size, all of those factors. I think as a startup, your ability to sell where someone can grow in the company can also help you to get talent a little bit cheaper. I'd find someone that we'd pay a little less to than they could go make at a bigger company, but their ability to grow their skill set or get promoted in the business was much faster timeline. And so they saw value in that to make a little less money today to improve their skill set faster. So I think you can get people a little bit under market rate, but you don't want to push that limit too much because then you have people who aren't happy and turnover issues. So I think it depends a lot on those.
And you just put an ad in Career Builder, or is there another approach?
Sadly, that does not work so well these days. Even as the Terminus brand grew, we still didn't always get great inbound talent. So the best way to get talent is go outbound. So two things. On the inbound side, post on the ATV job board or Atlanta Ventures job board. If you're connected with other entrepreneur startup groups, post there. Keys to success. The job description that's going to attract the right entrepreneurial salesperson will be something like, join our team as the first salesperson to help drive our culture and the foundation of our sales. So you want to make the job description appeal to someone who'd want to go to an early stage company. And then post on those types of startup entrepreneurial job boards, and definitely promote on LinkedIn. Have anybody and everybody in sales share that on LinkedIn to their networks. And then I would say go outbound. There is nothing more powerful than a founder or C-level reaching out to somebody about a job. I've talked to so many young people that took a job at a startup because the CEO or founder reached out to them on LinkedIn and said, hey, Mike, you seem like a talented salesperson. I don't know you yet, but you might be a perfect fit for my business. I'm looking for my first salesperson. You seem like the right person. Can we chat? And often somebody will take that call. So I would do outbound. Find companies similar. So if you have, let's say at Terminus, marketing software, 30K ACV, we would look for similar types of companies. We'd try to poach from Pardot, from Marketo, from maybe a Sales Fusion. We actually ended up finding Career Builder was good for us, even though it wasn't MarTech. So you kind of try to find companies with similar deal size, sales model, and or audience they sell to, and proactively look for salespeople in those companies.
Is it ethical to ask them for their tax returns? I hear all kinds of stuff when you're hiring salespeople.
I think it depends on what you're going to pay them. I'd say if you have a more entry-level salesperson and you're going to be paying them 50, 60K base salary, I probably wouldn't do that. If you're going to hire an enterprise guy, you're going to pay 120K plus base salary to, absolutely. I'm happy to pay you that amount if you're worth it. Show me your W-2, and if you're really making that kind of money, you're clearly selling, I'll pay you that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh.
Sorry about that. Terrible at football. I had a question about at what point in the sales process does that influence the pricing model of the product or service that you're offering? So oftentimes, at some point, we had 10 clients fall off because we thought we're too expensive, which is ironic because we got into the business we're in right now because other services were cost prohibitive. So we lost clients saying that your solution is much better, but you guys are expensive. And we don't want to cheapen our product, but at the same time, we do have a huge profit margin, and we're able to do that. We just don't know, I mean, how do you come to that sweet point? It's so
Yeah.
difficult for a SaaS product to be able to price it just right.
So that is a very tricky question because of, I think, Kirk, what you said or what you were asking about, or no, somebody over here asked, value versus price. Often the answer someone gives you as to why they leave isn't the real answer. So it could be that the price is too high. It could be that they're not seeing enough value. And so the best way to solve for these things is keep an insane amount of data points in your CRM. Meaning, I would look at product usage. I would look at comparing price points to other providers. I'd look at any number of things that show how invested in the product someone is and what type of outcome that could actually be driving for their business. And you just kind of use the data points to the best of your knowledge, but you may also experiment. So maybe the next 10 customers you bring on at a lower price point, and you compare cohorts of customers. We did a lot of that at Terminus. We'd bring on a cohort for a quarter at X pricing model. The next quarter we'd bring on another, and then we'd monitor customer happiness, customer churn based on those types of things. So you might also want to do kind of an A/B test.
Pricing structure, or did it,
Mostly, yeah. It was a set
So,
pricing
okay.
structure. We had 3 pricing plans, which isn't ideal. It's better if you have a model where it can scale based on some factor that drives value. We didn't have that.
yeah, because we have a standard tiered pricing based on volume, and it's on their website, and we just don't want to keep having to customize that for every new client that comes in. It just
You
creates
shouldn't
a,
have to.
yeah, well, I mean, if someone is, for example, doesn't want to commit, our average deal size on per month is 6,000 to 10,000. So people oftentimes, and they have to commit to that. They have to pay that amount upfront for the service. So oftentimes that's a little pushback because, like, oh, you know, we really like you, but why would we pay you that upfront? I mean, that money upfront when we haven't used it yet? We just want to get some.
They pay up front for the year or for the month?
They could do either. So usually they go with the month. They could use an annual plan and get 20%
That's
off.
how I would structure it. Yeah, I'd make the monthly plan or quarterly plan, quarterly's better than monthly, more expensive, and say, yeah, if you have 2 options, better price or lower risk. You pick which one. Like, it's all a negotiation, and so you want to use the leverage that you have. And so, sure, we can be totally easy to do business with, but it's going to be more expensive for you because it's a greater risk for our business. And the way you phrase it is, we put a lot of energy and effort into making you successful as a customer in your first 90 days. So we technically will lose money on you as a customer if you only stay with us for a month. But we're willing to offer you a monthly plan because we are so confident you're going to be really happy with what we provide. But with that said, I mean, you do have to pay up front for the month. And it'll be more expensive, but it helps you to mitigate risk. And then once you're confident that we're the right partner for you, you can upgrade to the annual plan and save 15%. Yeah. But I might experiment with price. It's not always about, I mean, there's the perceived value part of it. It's tricky. I don't have the right answer for you. Good luck, though. There's one more up here, JC. Ready?
How many, I know it matters with ACV, but how many deals are reps at Terminus, for example, working at any given time? And what's the optimal kind of strategy?
It matters a little bit on size of deal. It matters a lot, I think, on the market that you're in. So if you're a rep at salesforce.com, you may have 20, 30 accounts in your pipeline, and you're really working 10 at a time. At Terminus, they had 80 in their pipeline. They're really working a good 30 of them at a time. And so we found that when we would start a deal, someone was like, because, let me take a step back. Our software was something, it was solving a problem people often didn't know they had, so they didn't have budget for it. So they would hear about it, get excited, love it, but then they couldn't buy it for another 12 months because they had to change strategy in their business. So for us, sales cycles were longer, so they'd work a lot more deals, but have less that were like truly active. So I think those things depend. 80, yeah, each rep had 80.
But they're really just working about 30-ish?
Yeah, so 80-ish in their pipeline. There were probably 30 that were truly in an active, engaged sales process. And the others who started a conversation, were interested, we're still kind of having conversations. We didn't quite want to dead them yet, but they weren't at a place where they were aggressively moving forward. So then we had to find ways to get them to cut some from the pipeline, but it ranges. What are you saying at Curricula?
Like hundreds inside of the reps pipeline, but it's same thing. It's like
Hundreds.
Hundreds,
So-
so we need more reps, obviously, but I'm just trying to find what's the break-even point of where someone can
Not
have the
hundreds.
amount of hours per month to actively do it, so you can start segmenting
Yeah.
out to.
There's not a perfect science on that, but I would always study my reps and try to figure it out because my CEO would say, well, I think we need to put more reps into the equation. And so I would try to do estimates on how many meetings I thought someone could handle and how many deals they could work at a time. Again, it's not a perfect science, but hundreds is probably a lot. I will say there was a point where my reps started getting more and more in their pipeline because we didn't have a territory model. So they thought, I'll just sit on these accounts, keep them as ops, even though I'm not working them, and nobody else can touch them. So I had to put a cap on it and said you can only work 100 accounts, and then I think we eventually did lower it to 80. But we put a cap on the number of ops they could have. So if you want to bring in a new opportunity, you have to dead some out, and once those are deaded out and you're not working them, somebody else could pick them up. So I'd encourage you to try to do some rough math to see how much time does it take to work a deal properly, and figure out how many you think they can actually work. Yeah.
When you were talking about total addressable market, what's the best tool to use in order to figure that out?
Yeah, the best tool to use for total addressable market, it depends on what elements of the ICP are there. So if it's just based on vertical and company size, you could use a Zoom Info or a Discover Org or something like that. No one tool will ever have every single company, but it'll give you a good estimate. I think when you're an earlier stage company, I just go for a rough estimate. If you want to be a little more formal, you may need to buy 2 or 3 data tools and cross-compare them, which is a pain in the ass, but it'll give you a more accurate visual. Because we used technology in ours, we had to pull in tools like a Datanyze to show us if they were using Salesforce or marketing automation. So it really depends on what are the things that you need to vet and what data tools have the best data on those attributes.
Hey, just,
So.
sorry, real quick, ballparking TAM though, I use consulting firms. I use
Oh, that's
consulting
great.
firms research like crazy. Like, they're awesome. You can call them up, get with the most junior analyst you can find, and just get them on the phone and get a ton of information out of them.
That's a great point because they're also going to have access to a lot more data tools than you probably want to pay for as a startup. Good call.
For a B2C business, talk a lot about enterprise, but some of us are kind of direct to consumer. How does that strategy differ in like
A
your
lot.
sales approach? Yeah, I know, and I was just wondering,
Totally, it depends a lot. So like, what is the price point of your B2C product or solution?
$10, $20? So low price point, very low price
So
point.
in that case, if it's higher level, more expensive B2C, some of this is similar. If it's lower B2C, like truly a consumer product, really marketing is the play. So it wouldn't make sense to hire a salesperson for $200,000 that's cold calling, these people to say, would you like to buy some new Nikes? Because I can come fit you at your home. So instead what you want to do is take advantage of things like SEO. If someone's searching for that product, how do you make sure you're being found? If you are targeting 20-somethings, you want to probably be all over Instagram. I'm certainly not the expert in that field, but it's really more of a marketing play than sales.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
From your perspective.
You've got a mic on your desk?
Working? Yeah. From your perspective going forward, what are the top 3 market opportunities for SaaS apps for high growth? Just off the top of your head.
I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that. Are you looking for a new company idea? 3, just market growth opportunities.
Yeah.
I don't know. The trend that I'm seeing a lot of are like these middleware tools that are taking off, like a Twilio. Of course, they're a much bigger company now, but something that's able to power other businesses to do what they do really well. I don't know. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Upsurge in healthcare. The system that's broken. Oh, there you are.
Upsurge in healthcare. Yep.
Healthcare.
Other thoughts? A lot of you guys spend a lot of time with startups.
A lot of industries are going with paper and cloud-based.
That's fair. Now that this type of technology has been around for so long, when you can go into, instead of selling to marketers like a million other people, yeah, architecture, construction, older school industries that need to be disrupted, that's true, for sure. FinTech is huge.
Like I would suggest any platform that manages chaos. So it could be, nowadays there are so many solutions for so many problems everywhere. So any application that solves for that tends to be most popular. And I see that the trend of that happening.
Yeah. Cool. We're at 2:01. Any last questions? Final thoughts? Thank you. Thank you all. Oh, do you have one? Sure, yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn at, just search my name, Tonni Bennett on LinkedIn, or on Twitter at Tonni Bennett. And sure.
Wonderful. Well, you'll be around for a few minutes, right? Let's give Tony a big round of applause.